The story kicks off with a man saying he knows that name all too well. Then we get a breakdown of the guy he's talking about, completely uncontrollable, a sword master who barely leaves his room and basically out of his mind. This man? None other than Ghislain Perdium, the eldest son of Count Perdium. Useless, according to everyone around him. We see the guy Ghislain is fighting, stunned, asking how in the world the top knight of the north just got wrecked by someone like Ghislain. And Ghislain? He just coolly asks if the knight feels nice and cozy, bragging about how much he spent on the trap. Then he strolls away, ice cold, throwing a glare over his shoulder, asking if the guy's enjoying himself. The knight can't believe it. There's no way this garbage is the real Ghislain. He demands to know how Ghislain knew about his plans. Ghislain doesn't hold back. He knew everything. Not just the plan, but how many people were involved, who the spies were, and even who sent reinforcements. Ghislain had it all figured out from the start, playing them like puppets. Enraged, the knight says there's no way someone like Ghislain could pull this off, calling him trash. But before he can finish, Ghislain shuts him up with a hard kick to the face, telling him to quit talking. He makes it clear, no matter how many times they try to invade, he's the one who's going to win the war every single time. Ghislain takes off his helmet and asks, "Do you know why?" He answers himself, saying, "It's because I already have all the plans." Suddenly, the scene jumps back to a year ago in the kingdom of Lithuania, near the Perdium estate. We see Ghislain staring at his shaking hands, confused. He touches his throat, shocked to still be alive. He whispers, "Impossible. I was just killed." The flashback reveals him in the middle of combat, his sword flying out of his hand, leaving him wide open. "Damn it," he mutters, just before his opponent slashes him across the chest, deepening the wounds, already bleeding heavily. He drops to his knees as a red-haired knight looks down on him, declaring, "This is how it ends." The knight, Idun, one of the continent's 7 strongest noble knights, mocks him. Ghislain Perdium, the Mercenary King, has fallen. Idun states the war is over and asks if Ghislain has any last words. Ghislain, clearly in pain, says, "No, just a shame I couldn't get my revenge." Then, glaring up at Idun, he spits, "I hope you die here." Idun sighs, calling Ghislain arrogant, but admits he didn't expect him to be the eldest son of the fallen Perdium household. He recalls how Ghislain left his family after his sister's death. Ghislain, now suspicious, asks, "How do you know that? You're from a different kingdom." Idun smirks and says, "Of course, I know. I worked hard to track you down. After all, it was us, the ones who allied with the Delphian household, to bring your family down." The words we hit Ghislain like a blow, realizing that more than just Duke Delphian's household conspired against him. With a cold, uncaring gaze, Idun presses his sword to Ghislain's throat. "There's no point in explaining more. You'll be dead soon. Just accept it." Desperate, Ghislain screams, calling Idun a bastard, vowing he'll never forgive him. But Idun remains indifferent. "I don't care." He swings his sword, slicing Ghislain's head clean off, blood spraying into the air as the scene fades out. Ghislain reflects on how he was decapitated in that moment. Yet here he stands, head still firmly attached to his shoulders. He wonders if it was all just a hallucination. Looking at his younger self, he questions if maybe he's been captured, used as a lab rat by the mages. If that's the case, those arrogant fools are going to regret keeping him alive. Suddenly, someone calls out, "Young master." Ghislain turns to see one of the Perdium soldiers, Ricardo, approaching. Ricardo tells him to come out, saying he knows Ghislain is awake. Without hesitation, Ghislain shuts him down, telling him to be quiet. With a cold edge, he presses his blade to Ricardo's throat, warning that he might let him live if he answers some questions, or maybe not. The air around them thickens as Ghislain releases a deadly killing intent. Ricardo, clearly puzzled, stares at him. "What's going on?" "This is crossing a line," he mutters, sighing like this wasn't the first time something strange had happened. Ghislain is taken aback by the casual response, wondering why Ricardo isn't more scared, given the circumstances. "What are you talking about?" he asks. Ricardo casually pushes Ghislain away and says, "You wore yourself out after your tantrum earlier and passed out." Ghislain frowns. "Tantrum? What are you talking about?" Ricardo sighs again, explaining that Ghislain had been throwing a fit about wanting to lead the group to raid some orcs. Ghislain, now even more confused, asks, "What kind of nonsense is this?" Ricardo, with growing frustration, tells him, "You need to get it together, man. Everyone's waiting on us." Ghislain asks where they're heading, and Ricardo, a little surprised, responds, "Where else?" "We're going to the Perdium estate." That statement hits Ghislain like a punch. He grabs Ricardo by the shoulder, demanding, "Say that again." Ricardo, now concerned, asks, "What's wrong?" But Ghislain pushes him further, asking if he means the fallen Perdium estate. At this, Ricardo looks confused. The scene shifts to Ghislain, standing atop a cliff, gazing down at the Perdium estate below. Ghislain looks at the estate, shocked. "It really is my house," he mutters, wondering how it's still standing. He clearly remembers it being reduced to ashes in the past. Ricardo notices his expression and asks, "Did you have a nightmare or something? Calling your own household fallen is too much. If the Count hears that, you'll be thrown out for sure." Ghislain, still in disbelief, pinches his cheek. "Am I dreaming?" But the sharp pain snaps him back to reality. "Nope, that hurts. So this is real." Looking at his reflection in a nearby window, he notices his younger face staring back at him. And the estate, untouched, just like it was before everything went wrong. This can only mean one thing. Either he's traveled back in time or landed in some alternate timeline. His younger self had resented the household, his immaturity fueled by feelings of inferiority. As time passed, people in the family began to avoid him, treating him like a burden. Unable to handle the constant criticism, he ran away from home. Years later, he became a mercenary, surviving countless battles and forging his skills. He had returned to Perdium seeking redemption, hoping to make amends for his past mistakes. But instead of reconciliation, he was met with the ruins of his family's home. Everything he held dear gone. But right now, everything is still here. His family, the people he cares about, they're all still alive. A grin slowly spreads across his face. "I can't believe it," he says to himself, nearly bursting with the urge to celebrate. Maybe even sing with joy. But he quickly reins himself in. It's too early to get excited. He recalls something Ricardo had mentioned, the raid on the orcs. Ghislain's smile fades. He knows this day all too well. This is the day most of the raid squad is massacred by the orcs. In his previous life, he had joined that same raid squad, desperate to make a name for himself. Cue the Gambit meme. The report said there were only 3 orcs. Easy enough, especially for someone like him with no experience leading a squad. But when they arrived, it wasn't just 3. There were over 20 orcs waiting for them. Almost everyone died because of Ghislain's stubbornness. He'd insisted on commanding them all, thinking it'd be easy since the orcs had no real strategy. But now, as he faces the same situation again, he knows the real problem is whether these guys will even trust him. They all think he's a useless bastard. Suddenly, something flies overhead. A massive defense fortress comes crashing down in front of him, and soldiers start screaming, "The orcs are here!" Ghislain looks up to see giant, reddish orcs charging straight at them. He wonders, did they show up this fast in my past life too? The battlefield quickly turns into chaos. The orcs are tearing through the soldiers, utterly overwhelming them. There's no way we're winning this. Ghislain thinks, if there was ever a time for plot armor to kick in, it's now, because at this rate he's about to die all over again in his second life. A man's panicked voice cuts through the noise. "Get into formation. Don't panic." It's the raid squad commander, Scoven, trying to rally the troops. Ironic, since panic is written all over his face. Scoven narrowly dodges an orc's blade, gritting his teeth. "We let our guard down. We weren't ready for an ambush like this." He glances around and mutters, "There's way more of them than the report said. At this rate, we're all going to die." Just then, Ghislain calls out to Scoven, making him turn in confusion. "Behind you!" Ghislain yells. An orc is charging at Scoven from behind, ready to strike. Without thinking, Ghislain dashes toward him, putting a hand on Scoven's shoulder and shoves him out of the way just before the orc's attack lands. Scoven, thrown to safety, looks back, confused and shocked. Why? Why would Ghislain sacrifice himself for me? But he's wrong. Ghislain isn't sacrificing himself at all. In one fluid motion, he drives his blade into the orc's hand, cutting through the creature's arm and leg, severing them cleanly. The massive orc lets out a deafening scream before collapsing to the ground, the sheer size of it shaking the earth beneath it. Everyone around is left speechless, staring at Ghislain in disbelief. With a casual flick of his wrist, Ghislain cleans the blood off his blade, muttering, "I guess I still can't use mana. If only I'd come back a little earlier." Ghislain strides over to Scoven, his expression cold. "Are you the commander?" he asks. Scoven, still dazed, just stares at him. Ghislain doesn't wait for an answer. "Hand it over." Scoven blinks, confused. "What are you talking about?" "I want the commander's rights," Ghislain says bluntly. Scoven's face twists in disbelief. "Are you out of your mind? You're an idiot. But this? With everyone's lives on the line? You can't be serious." He stands up, shaking his head. "Do you think this is a game?" Scoven scoffs and starts walking away, muttering, "Even if you're the young master, I can't just hand over the authority the Lord gave me. Not like this." Ghislain sighs, thinking to himself, "This is annoying. Though honestly, I'd probably react the same way if some fool came up to me, demanding the right to command." At that moment, another orc charges toward them, eyes full of fury, ready to avenge its fallen comrade. Scoven, still oblivious to what just happened, yells, "Fall back! I'll handle this!" "Did he just forget what I did?" Ghislain thinks, frustrated. Realizing he has no choice, Ghislain raises his sword, takes aim, and throws it with precision. The blade whistles past Scoven, nearly grazing his back. Scoven spins around, grabbing Ghislain by the collar. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" But before he can get any angrier, the sound of something heavy being impaled cuts through the air. Scoven pauses, confused by the sudden silence. He turns around, and his eyes widen as he sees the orc standing behind him, a sword buried deep in its forehead. The massive creature grunts, stumbles, and crashes to the ground dead. Scoven stares at the fallen beast, completely baffled. How? How did you hit its weak spot?" Ghislain, pulling his blade from the orc's skull, turns to him and asks, "Do you know what's the most important thing in battle?" Around them, soldiers cower behind their shields, trembling from the orc's terrifying battle cries. Ghislain glances at the frightened men. You can't win a battle when your troops are filled with fear. You need momentum. With that, Ghislain, sword in hand, dashes back into the fray, determined to turn the tide of the fight. Ghislain sprints through the debris of the fallen tower, launching himself into the air above the orcs charging at his comrades. In one swift motion, he lands, plunging his sword straight through the head of an orc right in front of everyone. Scoven, watching from the sidelines, can't believe his eyes. Ghislain yanks his blade free, glaring at the remaining orcs. "Come at me," he shouts, his voice carrying over the battlefield. Standing on the head of the fallen orc, he smirks. "I'll kill every last one of you." The orcs roar in response, charging at him as he charges back. The first one swings its massive arm, but Ghislain swiftly slices it clean off before dashing toward the next two. He ducks under a wild swing from one, countering with a quick slash to both of their chests. His blade glides effortlessly, severing their heads in a blur of motion. Scoven watches in disbelief as another orc crumbles, headless, at Ghislain's feet. Is this a dream? Scoven wonders. Even as a mana user, he struggles to keep up with these creatures, so how is this skinny young man taking them down so easily? Despite Ghislain's seemingly unstoppable rampage, his breath grows heavier, and he's clearly tired. Yet, even in his exhaustion, his movements are minimal, precise. He dodges attacks with the smallest of steps, using his swordsmanship to strike at their weak spots, moving like a manaless swordmaster, or maybe something even greater. Ghislain laughs, calling out, "Is that all you've got? I'm not even warmed up yet." He looks around at the orcs in disappointment. "You're supposed to be a warrior species? You're not living up to the hype." As he starts to turn his back, the soldiers who had been watching from afar notice that all the orcs are now charging straight at Ghislain. Panic sets in among the men. "He's running away!" they shout, fearing that their hope is about to abandon them. Scoven stands frozen in place, lost in thought. What is he thinking? He wonders. Ghislain drawing the attention of the orcs was great, but now he seems to be retreating, heading in a direction that makes Scoven's heart race. His eyes widen as he realizes where Ghislain is going, the edge of a cliff, one that overlooks the Perdium estate. Sweat beads on his forehead, panic rising. There's no way, Scoven thinks. He's not actually planning to. Scoven yells to his men, "Raise a shield wall. We follow the first sun into battle." As the orcs charge toward Ghislain, now cornered at the cliff's edge, Ghislain thinks to himself, Scoven must have already figured out my plan, if he's any good as a commander. He smirks. I'd love to cut them all down myself, but with this shitty stamina, no chance. The orcs close in on Ghislain, snarling and ready to strike. But then they hear something from behind, the pounding of boots and shields. They turn to see Scoven and the soldiers, shields up, spears ready. Ghislain grins, eyes gleaming. "Perfect," he mutters, and without hesitation, he leaps backward off the cliff. Now's the time. As Ghislain falls, Scoven roars to his men, "Push them off the cliff." The troops charge with all their strength, driving their shields into the orcs, giving them nowhere to retreat. A brutal struggle ensues, men screaming with effort as they push with everything they have. One by one, the orcs lose ground and tumble over the edge, roaring in panic as they plummet to their deaths. Below, Ghislain has stabbed his sword into the cliff wall to slow his descent. He watches with satisfaction as the orcs fall past him, crashing into the ground below. Fall damage. Should have brought a water bucket, he muses with a grin. Back at the top, the men stand exhausted but triumphant, disbelief washing over them. "We actually did it," one of them says, still catching his breath. Scoven, however, isn't celebrating yet. He rushes to the cliff's edge, calling out, "Ghislain!" His heart races as he spots the first son still clinging to the cliffside, sword buried in a rock. Relief floods over him, and for the first time, he smiles. Scoven extends his hand. "Grab on!" But Ghislain, his strength fading, looks up at Scoven, expression calm. "I can't," he says, voice barely a whisper. His fingers slip, and before anyone can react, Ghislain releases his sword and falls into the abyss below. Scoven's heart stops. This wasn't supposed to happen. As Ghislain plummets, a hazy memory forms in his mind. A soft voice echoes through his fading consciousness, Ghislain. He sees her, his younger sister, Elena, as a child, calling out to him. A flood of memories washes over him. Her laughter, their moments together. But with time, as his attitude worsened, their bond frayed. She grew to resent him, and those precious memories turned bitter. In his dreamlike state, he reaches out, trying to hold onto the fragments of his memories. "Elena," he whispers, "these are my memories of you." Ghislain suddenly feels a tug on his arm. Through his blurry vision, he sees his sister Elena, tears in her eyes, pulling him up. "Let's go together," she says, her voice trembling. Tears well up in his eyes too, and as he tries to respond, his world shifts. His eyes snap open, and he finds himself staring at the ceiling. He's back indoors. Confusion sets in as he looks at his hands. "They actually saved me," he thinks, feeling the ache throughout his body, a telltale sign of having pushed himself to his limits. The pain assures him he's alive. As he tries to process the strange dream, a knock sounds on the door. A woman enters, calling his name. "You're awake," she says, relief in her voice. She's carrying a bucket of water, a look of genuine happiness on her face. Her name is Belinda, his childhood tutor. She lets out a deep sigh. "Do you know how worried I was?" she scolds gently. "I told you to let the soldiers handle the orcs." Before she can finish, Ghislain leaps out of bed and embraces her tightly. Startled, she asks, "What are you doing? Did I do something wrong?" "No," he replies softly. "I'm just glad to see you." His voice wavers. He can barely believe she's standing there. Belinda had always been the one person who stood by his side despite his foolishness. After his family's downfall, she disappeared. He never saw her again until now. Belinda, clearly confused, frowns slightly. "You're acting strange. We see each other every day." Ghislain knows he has to tell her the truth. "Belinda, something terrible is coming to Perdium. A catastrophe. I've seen it." She raises an eyebrow, skeptical. "What are you talking about?" "I died, Belinda, and came back to life." Her sarcasm is quick, right? "And I'm sure the orcs almost killed you too." He tries to explain further, but Belinda shakes her head. "You should worry about yourself first. You're the one in more danger than Perdium." She continues to fuss over him, concerned for his health and his actions. Ghislain realizes convincing her right now won't work. Then she asks, "What would you have done if you were too injured to go to the festival?" Ghislain pauses, remembering the festival. Belinda sighs, reminding him, "Lady Elena has been looking forward to this. It's a chance for you two to grow closer again. Don't tell me you've already forgotten." Ghislain's heart races as he recalls the festival, a yearly celebration that always filled him with a mix of excitement and dread. He holds up a cherished picture of him and Elena, their faces bright and carefree. "In my past life, I never had time to enjoy these moments because of everything I went through," he admits, his voice tinged with regret. How long until the festival? Belinda thinks for a moment, then replies, "You have about a week left." "A week?" he echoes, disbelief flooding through him. So close, he thinks, knowing this festival holds a dark memory. Just then, Elena peeks into the room, her curiosity piqued. "Are you in here?" she asks, stepping inside. Ghislain feels a knot in his stomach as he realizes the day that changed everything is fast approaching. This was the day that would lead to his sister's tragic death. Without thinking, he hugs her tightly. Both Elena and Belinda freeze, caught off guard by the sudden affection. Elena blushes and pulls away, flustered. "What kind of prank is this? You're creeping me out. I've missed you," Ghislain says earnestly, still taken aback by her reaction. "Seriously? Belinda told you to come here, didn't she?" she retorts, shoving him back slightly. "What game are you playing?" Ghislain is taken aback, struggling to comprehend how he could have pushed her away so easily in his past life. I didn't mean any of that," he stammers. "I was a total jerk. I didn't appreciate you." His apology catches both Elena and Belinda off guard. They exchange incredulous glances. "Wait, did you just apologize?" Belinda asks, astonished. "Yeah. What hit you on the head?" Elena adds, raising an eyebrow. "Nothing. I dealt with the orcs myself," he defends, irritation creeping into his voice, though it's half-hearted. The playful banter feels strange, but comforting. Then, as if on cue, the delayed soreness from his earlier exertion hits him like a wave, and he collapses to the floor with a groan. Elena bursts out laughing. "You right? You totally handled them all by yourself." Belinda joins in, shaking her head, and Ghislain can't help but smile, feeling warm from their laughter. This moment, so simple yet so meaningful, fills him with nostalgia. He thinks back to how he wasted time on trivial matters instead of cherishing these moments with the people he loved. Why did I let pride get in the way? He wonders. The festival next week weighs heavily on his mind. He remembers the regret he felt when he rejected Elena's invitation to go together, making an excuse about being upset from the raid squad. That was the last time he ever saw her. "I won't make the same mistake again," he vows quietly to himself, determination rising within him. The past won't repeat itself. Ghislain's stomach twists as he recalls the moment he rejected Elena's invitation. The last time they spoke before her life was cruelly cut short. Her body had been found shredded to pieces, along with her guards, far from the festival grounds. The weight of that regret was a constant companion in his previous life, haunting him day in and day out. Suddenly, a knock interrupts his thoughts. "Can we come in?" Elena's guards, Jamal and Philip, step into the room. Elena turns to them, a frown crossing her face. "I told you to wait outside." Jamal looks apologetic. "I'm sorry, but the servants asked you to oversee the work on the festival supplies." "Why would they need Elena for that?" Belinda interjects, arms crossed. "You wouldn't know this, Ghislain, since you're always so lazy. But there's a shortage of workers." Ghislain raises an eyebrow. Is it low enough that even Elena needs to work right now? He hadn't bothered to keep track of such things in his past life, and it felt strange to be hearing about them now. "I'd like to help," he offers, sincerity lacing his tone. Elena looks at him, disbelief etched on her face, and both she and Belinda are momentarily stunned. "You? Help?" she questions, a mix of surprise and skepticism in her voice. Outside the castle, vendors are bustling around, setting up stalls for the festival, the air filled with a sense of food and festivities. Ghislain yells out again, "I said I'd help. Go away. People will be too scared to work with you around." Elena shoves him back, frustration clear in her voice. "Is this really how you treat someone who wants to help?" he shoots back. "Your body was found near the slums, far from the festival. Someone must have lured you there or forcibly taken you. I need to know the ins and outs of the castle to prevent that from happening again." Before Elena can respond, a figure rushes over, breathless. "Ghislain!" It's a knight named Fergus, his face pale and eyes wide with concern. "I heard about the orcs. I'm so glad you're okay." He breaks down, tears spilling down his cheeks. Ghislain shakes his head, wanting to shift the focus away from the heavy topic. "Okay, we can stop talking about that now," he says gently. Elena can't help but chuckle. "Great timing, Fergus. He's acting a bit strange after waking up. I'd like you to take him back to his room," she orders. "As you wish," Fergus replies, his demeanor shifting back to professionalism. "Guess it can't be helped," Ghislain says, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "But I need to know more about what's going on around the castle." especially before the festival next week. He pauses for a moment, recalling an area he had heard about. There's an abandoned training field in the castle. Take me there. Fergus nods, eager to help. Right this way. As they move through the castle halls, Ghislain's mind races with thoughts of the festival, his sister, and the shadows of his past. He's determined to make a change this time. No more regrets. As they step into the abandoned training field, Fergus glances over, curiosity evident on his face. He quickly leads Ghislain further into the training area. Once inside, Ghislain can hardly believe his eyes. The field, though seemingly forgotten, is in excellent condition. It's a sprawling space with enough room for various types of training, a perfectly suitable location for him to hone his skills. I never saw anything like this as a mercenary, he admits, a sense of nostalgia washing over him. Fergus beams with pride. We kept it maintained just in case you ever wanted to use it again. I thought that maybe what you're going through is just a phase, a reluctance to train. Ghislain's expression falters as he wonders if Fergus took this much care of the place in his past life too. Regret churns in his stomach. You need to live a long life, Fergus. Dying is hella painful. Fergus raises an eyebrow. Sounds like you've experienced death. Are you serious? Sharp as ever, Ghislain replies, a wry smile forming on his lips. I actually did die and come back. Brain damage, maybe? Fergus jokes, but Ghislain knows he isn't far off. I'll start training now. You can head back, Ghislain says, determination edging into his tone. All right, I'll just wait outside then, Fergus replies, stepping back as Ghislain prepares for his session. Ghislain reflects on his past, remembering how he'd always treated those around him like they were enemies, blind to the relationships he had. That short-sightedness had cost him dearly. Now, with only a week to prepare, he feels the pressure mounting. In his past life, he had learned that the one behind Elena's death was a lord from a neighboring territory. That event had triggered a war that ultimately led to the downfall of Perdium. Her death had been the starting point of his family's demise. Knowing this, Ghislain resolves to set things straight. First things first, he murmurs to himself, I need to improve my physique. Time is limited, but he knows he can at least master control over mana. Mana, an ethereal resource that enables humans to break through their physical limits. Most people find the first step of sensing and absorbing mana the hardest part, but he had managed to do that even amidst the chaos of battle. Ghislain closes his eyes, focusing inward. He remembers how to connect with the mana particles floating in the air, bundling them together in his mind as if he were spinning a spool. For someone like him, who has fought in thousands, no, tens of thousands of battles, creating a mana core is practically a piece of cake. With newfound resolve, he begins his training, ready to harness the mana and build the strength he'll need to protect his sister and his family from the looming threat. The echoes of his past life fuel his determination, and as he focuses on his breathing, he can almost feel the mana responding to his will, swirling around him in anticipation. As Ghislain finishes tightening his belt, he reflects on the past week of intense training. He had pushed himself beyond his limits, tapping into a technique he had almost forgotten. Creating multiple mana cores, 5 in his past life, was no small feat, and it was an inherently unstable method. His nose and mouth bled from the exertion, a reminder of the cost of such power. 3 is my limit now, he mutters to himself, though he knows he'll push for more in time. This method allowed him to unleash explosive force, but it came at a price, a massive drain on his mana reserves. He recalls the night he lost to Idun in his past life, bringing down an entire order against him when he was already spent. If only he had faced him in a fair fight, things would have ended differently, he would have won. But those thoughts are just coping mechanisms, he tells himself, a way to deal with his past failures. No more. This time will be different. He has a youthful body and plenty of time to train. His thoughts turn to revenge, not just against Idun, but against the Delphine family, those bastards who had a hand in destroying his home. He vows to make them all pay. A week later, the festival day arrives, fireworks illuminating the night sky. Ghislain steps outside, a mix of excitement and trepidation bubbling within him as he heads toward the festival grounds to meet his sister. When he finds her, her surprise is evident. You actually came? She asks, eyes wide with disbelief. What happened to you? He shrugs, trying to play it cool. As a Perdium, I should at least show up to festivals every once in a while. Elena tilts her head, studying him. You've been acting really weird lately. I've heard you've done nothing, but trained this past week. What's wrong with a knight in training focusing on his skills? He retorts, raising an eyebrow. But you didn't care about that stuff just last week. You said Dad was annoying and that you wished you were already the Lord. She laughs, her voice light. But I like this new you. It feels like the old you is back, she adds, her smile brightening the evening. Ghislain glances at her, warmth flooding his chest. I realized something this past week, he says, taking a breath to steady himself. I've wasted too much time. I want to protect those I care about. Walk toward the festival. The sounds of laughter and celebration fill the air. Ghislain can't help but feel a sense of hope, a hope for the future, for revenge, and for rekindling the bond with his sister that he nearly lost. He may have been a piece of shit in his past life, but now he's determined to be better, to protect Elena and his home from the darkness that looms ahead. Ghislain watches as his sister Elena drags him deeper into the festival, a mix of excitement and dread swirling in his gut. With each step, he can't shake the feeling that something significant is brewing, something that could change everything. His actions this time are different. He's more aware of the ripples they create, like a stone thrown into still water. As they move through the crowded stalls, the vibrant colors and joyful shouts fill the air, but Ghislain's mind is racing. What if this night isn't just another festival, he wonders? What if it's a turning point? After enjoying some delicious bread, Elena, bubbling with energy, expresses her disappointment. It's getting a bit boring, though. Same old stuff every year. Why isn't there anything new? Ghislain shrugs, masking his apprehension. Maybe the festival's just not over yet. He recalls whispers of a hidden performance, an event he believes might shift the atmosphere entirely. I heard from a friend there are new attractions elsewhere, he suggests, trying to sound casual. Jamal, eager to keep the fun going, quickly agrees and leads the way. Let's check it out, he urges. As they walk, Ghislain feels a familiar weight settle over him. Jamal and Philip, his sister's most trusted knights in this life, are key players in the tragic events of his past. Their loyalty cost them their lives while protecting Elena, but in this new timeline, he's determined to alter that fate. Thank you for watching. I want to express my gratitude to those who have subscribed to my channel. I encourage you to support me by subscribing to my channel, and I will be Manhwa recap videos in every day. Thank you for your support, and I look forward to seeing you in the next installment.